Robinson, and welcome to RoboVoices. This is Miss Wong, and I am here with one of our middle schoolers, Harley. Welcome, Harley.
Hello, Mrs. Wong.
It is wonderful to have you here. I know that you had submitted a RoboVoice submission to talk about identity education and why it should be mandatory and taught from a young age. But before we get into that, like I always do with my RoboVoices, I want to just ask you some quick questions so our audience can get to know you just a little bit.
Of course.
All right, so here we go. First question, favorite color?
I like the cool colors area, like the blues, the greens, and like the purples.
That is very cool. How about favorite animal?
I like reptilian animals, like as how I'm going to describe it. So like the snakes, the lizards, all that kind of stuff.
Love it. How about favorite season?
I kind of like the in-between seasons, like spring and fall.
Me too.
Even though like my allergies suck during that time.
No!
It's just so nice, the in-betweens.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. The next question, favorite activity to do when you have an hour to yourself?
I really like ceramics, and I love to read as well, so it's awesome.
That is fantastic. Now, do you take ceramics here at Robinson?
I don't take ceramics, but I do the ceramics after school club.
Oh, that is perfect. That is great to hear. Oh my gosh. All right. And so here's the final one. Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
So I don't have an exact plan for the next 10 years, but I probably see myself somewhere in like doing something kind of artistic, I guess. I don't really know what kind of stuff in the arts area that I'd like to do, but I love all things artsy, so probably something along those lines.
So it makes sense why you love ceramics so much.
Yeah.
Well, that is good to hear. So with that, we're going to jump right into the topic. So Harley, you had submitted your thoughts on identity education, and it is something that they feel very passionate about. So Harley, why don't you tell us why this topic is so important to you?
So I find this really important because especially as we're moving on to where people feel more comfortable being themselves, it becomes more and more important that people should know how to respect people, their preferences, and like basically how you should go about meeting new people and navigating the world now.
So really getting to know somebody, right?
Exactly.
And part of that is that gender identity component, which isn't something that we should hide from, right? You know,
Exactly.
we want
like
to
that's
be
what we're getting into right now, and like this, like it's the 21st century. Here we are. It's a time to express ourselves, even if like in 5 years it's just like, oh, that was really cringy of me, but I'm still who I am. Like at least we got to express ourselves, like, and be happy and crazy and silly in our younger years.
Right. And it's important for us to create a safe environment here at school, right? Mm-hmm. This is where students should feel comfortable being who they are,
Exactly.
right? And part of that is being able to express that, you know, in a respectful way to one another and accept different perspectives and differences, right?
Exactly.
I think sometimes students and people in general sometimes are afraid of things they don't know about, right?
Yeah, which is why, like, especially introducing this at a younger age is, like, crucial, because then it becomes this weird thing that nobody wants to talk about, like, oh, did you hear about this person? Mm-hmm. Like, oh, that's kind of weird. Why did they do that? Why did they say this, say that? Like, why are they talking about this? Like, that's kind of weird. We haven't talked about that before. Mm-hmm. Like, we shouldn't talk about that. When in reality, it's kind of just like, well, at this point, this is kind of like a day-to-day thing. There's not really any reason why I should stay quiet. Like, this is where we are. We've come this far. We may as well start actually talking about people.
Right. And to just be more accepting of these differences, you know, and to not be judgmental just because we're different from one another. There's nothing wrong with being different from one another. You know,
it's really important because like that's especially the message that we're trying to push a lot in schools. So I do that and then have this whole thing of like, well, we're not going to talk about this whole part of people, but we're going to talk about the rest of this.
Right, right. And knowing that in society, there is more conversation about this,
Yeah.
right? And that conversation, some of it is positive, some of it is not so positive.
Especially like in schools though, like how you were saying in society specifically, but it's talked about lesser in schools because it's parents wanting to protect their kids, protect them from, I'm going to say, like being confused. Whereas if it were actually taught from a younger age, their children wouldn't be confused. It'd be like, oh, this is a day-to-day thing. Ask for somebody's name, ask for somebody's pronouns, ask if that's what they're going by at home, because sometimes it isn't always a safe environment.
Sure. So really what you're hoping for is a shift in schools in what is taught, right? That's really what you're thinking about,
Yes.
Harley. Yeah. And, being an educator for 29 years, yes, this is 29 years for me, there has been a shift in curricula, in various subjects and so forth, but certain topics tend to require more conversation to make certain things more accepting.
Yeah.
And you kind of, mentioned it earlier that, our community is important, right?
Yes.
We could not function as a school without our larger community, including our families, right? And so it's important for them to be a part of that conversation and understanding why we teach certain things.
Yeah, it's really important to just have people understand like why we're teaching these things, why it's super important to kids' mental health, to everything that's just going on around them, so that they feel free to be themselves. So it isn't just piling on top of everything else.
Absolutely. And you've really struck a chord there when you talk about mental health,
Exactly.
right? That is a huge topic right now for our society, because we are concerned about everyone being able to process and everyone to be able to deal with challenges in their lives. And part of that is, what are those challenges, right? What is
like
causing a problem?
A large, I'm going to say, in a way, more known one is like not being able to express yourself really takes a
Right.
big toll on your mental health.
Absolutely.
Like there are so many people that just struggle so much because they're not able to express themselves at home, at school, in front of other people, just because they don't feel safe.
Absolutely. And one of the messages we try to do here at Robinson, especially with our advisory lessons, is to be more accepting of others, right? You are hoping to have more targeted learning across the board regarding identity, correct?
Yes, so that we can have a little bit more specific conversations versus just don't be a bully, more focused on be accepting to people for who they are.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a really good message, right? If we were to get more into specific details regarding identity, then that would have to be a larger conversation with the county,
Yes.
right? Looking at overall guidelines regarding specific
Exactly.
curriculum and topics. So the hope is maybe this podcast can be shared with some of our leadership team, and the school board might hear this and say, okay, so here's this voice that we're hearing from Robinson. And it's one voice that I think is a worthy voice, but it hopefully isn't just your voice, right, Harley? The
Yeah.
hope is they are hearing from more families.
The whole point of this is that so that we can pick out specific students, hear their voices, see what their opinion is, and hopefully we can bring that up, and that could maybe rise to someplace bigger, and then being like, oh, this just lit a spark. Now we're going to talk about this more, and this is going to become important.
Right. Because in the end, it goes back to what you were saying, providing a safe and caring environment. And we push that all the time. That's what we want for all of FCPS.
It can just be a little bit more difficult if people don't recognize different things in people.
Right. I mean, we understand that middle school and high school students can make mistakes at times, but hopefully they can take a moment to really process and recognize the differences, because I think it's easier for some students to see similarities, right? Like things that they know and they're comfortable with. But sometimes when they encounter something that is different, it's hard for them to be more accepting of it, right?
Yeah,
and
it's harder to adjust or get used to.
Absolutely, right. But if we're able to educate in a safe environment to help them open up that perspective, that's what you're really hoping for. That's what it sounds like to me. Am I on the right track, Harley?
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds great. So, Harley, being here on RoboVoices with me is certainly one way to educate members of our community. Again, our audience for RoboVoices, our targeted audience, are students, families, and our just community as a whole there. So, if you were to think about other ways to get the message out there in understanding identity education, what are your thoughts on that?
So I think that there are just so many other great resources as well that you can get information from, learn about people from real life experiences of theirs. Like, there are a few places that might have like better information than others. Like, maybe you don't know that specifically right now, but like as you move on, you'll find out like, oh, hey, this is a great resource. I can recommend this to my family, my friends, other people that I know, and be like, hey, this is a wonderful place for you to learn about what's going on right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we know that the internet is full of resources, but one of the things I've learned is to always triangulate your data, which essentially means don't just necessarily trust one resource, right?
Try and go to multiple different areas, different corners, and be like,
yes.
this is similar enough. So I think that maybe I can build my own beliefs off of this.
Is it a reputable site versus, Joe Schmo, who might just be saying whatever they want to say on the internet, which we know is a thing as well.
Yeah.
But again, the bottom line with what you want is to educate more people so that everyone can be more accepting of identity differences that are out there.
Which is great, because this podcast, we can get people started on there like, oh, hey, I want to learn more about this. Why don't I move on? Maybe I can look this up. What are different resources where I can learn about this? Sites, areas, meetups, like where I can be like, oh, hey, I'm really curious about this. Maybe I can learn more.
Harley, you have done an amazing job articulating your thoughts today.
Thank you.
I am just so grateful to have met you today, knowing that you're going to be with us here at Robinson for a few more years. I'm excited.
Quite a few.
I'm excited for that. I'm excited to hear what you do. I'm excited to run into you in the halls and to just have future conversations with you. And I've learned so much about you and your thoughts. And that's really what the idea is with RoboVoices. So thank you so much for joining me.
Of course.
All right. We hope everyone has a great day.